I'm Peter Millard, and in the workshop this week we're going to take a look at Lamello's Clamex connectors and see how they compare to Festool's Domino Connect knockdown connectors. That's coming up next. You know, the more I think about it, the harder it becomes to think of a less appropriate name for these fittings than knockdown. Knockdown implies a sort of an impermanence, the idea that they're going to fall apart at any minute. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Most of the time, these fittings are used for building quite large things in small spaces. It gives you the benefit of getting flat-packed furniture into a building and then building it on site, even if it's custom-made and beautifully finished to fit in a particular room. I suppose the only thing you could say in its favour is that it's probably better than a knocked-up fitting. But other than that, these fittings are widely used for all kinds of things. They do have slightly unfortunate connotations with the old flat-pack furniture industry. But in fact, these particular fittings, the Lamello Clamex and Festool's Domino Connect, are extremely high quality and very sophisticated. Obviously, I'm fairly new to the Lamello Clamex fittings, but they've rapidly become a firm favourite of mine. And I've had the Domino Connect fittings for about a year or so. And I've used them a few times, not as much as I thought I would, to be perfectly honest. But let's take a quick look at both of these fittings, because it's fascinating to see how different they are. So when I got my Domino Connect kit last year, I bought the kit because it was all you could get. It came out literally at the time when I needed something like this, and I hadn't quite figured out what else I was going to do. The kit itself comes with all manner of little bits and pieces, all manner of gubbins, and the kit was the only thing that was available back then. It was about 350 quid or thereabouts, and that's quite a lot of money, but I figured it was worthwhile for the particular job that I had to do. In reality, there's all kinds of bits and pieces in here that you don't really need. These days, the kit itself is down to about 300 quid, and you can save about £80 just by buying the individual components that you think you might need. That 80 quid will go a long way towards buying a pack of 50 straight connectors or straight or angle connectors. So probably well worth doing if you're not too bothered about the fancy sustainer. One of the things that I wanted to use it for was to build a cabinet in a very tight space. Sometimes there just isn't space. You're putting a cabinet or a carcass into an alcove or a space where there's just no wiggle room on either side. You can barely get a screw in, let alone a screwdriver on the end of it. And I had one of those to do. It didn't quite fulfill the promise. We'll come to the reasons why later. But first of all, let's have a quick look, a closer look at one of these Domino connectors. So yes, it's when you start digging into the box of goodies like that you realise why you have a sustainer for these things. There are so many individual components in each particular connector. This is just a straight connector. This is going to do a simple right angle connector, and there are 5 individual pieces to this. 2 that go on the mortise side and 3 that go on the tenon side to lock it all together. That's a lot of bits. That's a lot of bits to keep track of. And when you start thinking about the different types of connector that they do as well, so for the LR30, the 32mm system connectors, connectors for those too, and for centre panel connectors as well, it makes sense to a certain extent to get the full kit if you think you're going to need all those little bits and pieces. But I think rather than try and explain how they work to you, why don't we just make a couple of quick joints with them, and I'll show you how different they are in practice. It certainly makes the 2 pieces of the Lamello Clamex connector look positively simple and elegant in comparison. So if you buy the Domino Connect kit, even though it comes with all kinds of things you're not necessarily going to need, it doesn't actually come with the one thing that you absolutely must have, and that's an 8mm cutter. So you must have an 8mm bit for your Domino, and then with that fitted, we can get cracking. So we're just going to make a simple angle joint here, just like the side of a carcass on the top. Poof, just 90 degrees straight in. 2 connectors, no measuring or marking, just working off the pins or paddles. And we'll get that done now. With the Domino on its narrowest setting and the plunge set to 15mm, we can put mortises into the face of the carcass. And then with the depth change to 28mm, we can put a corresponding mortise in the upper panel, making sure we reference off the same face. And then using the supplied jig and drill bit, we can drill the access hole. So putting these together is pretty straightforward. We have a metal sort of receiver which goes into the hole that we've drilled. This has little sort of tabs on the side of it just to make sure they face the side. And they are locked in place with a little nylon push fit locking filler. The other side of the connector is pretty simple as well. It's a little metal insert which goes snugly into the mortise you've just drilled, and there's a little pin like this which goes in there, and as you screw that up tightly it pulls this little flange down and the little fitting sort of gets its elbows out and grips inside the mortise. Very simple, very neat. So these are pretty easy to fit. The little pin just goes straight in there and tightens up. You get a little hex screwdriver to do this as well. But the other thing I found is because this whole pin is actually a hex shape, you can just take the bit out of a regular bit holder and use that. And then I also found a little 1/4 inch 6mm socket was useful just to get that balanced, because that scoop does have to face the inside, or at least the side where the other fitting is. And the pins up like this. The other panel just slots straight over it like that. And then we can use our little hex to put the 2 nuts in. And they just fit into that scoop in the pins, and I pull it up tight. You get provided with little cover caps in the kit. Well, not so little to be honest. In different colours. So how does Lamello's Zeta manage a similar sort of joint? Pretty straightforward actually. There are no pins or paddles to register from, but I just use the edge of the fence. Let's just pop a couple of those in now. So with those cut, we just need to flip this over and drill the access holes. Again, we've got a little jig for this. Goes into there. And a much smaller, much neater drill bit. Although, no dust collection. I have to confess, one of the things I do like about the Clamex fittings is it gives you a choice. There's a little teensy little pegs on these fittings, and it does give you the choice as to which piece goes where. I always prefer to have the little peggy bits, the little tenon stubby bits pointing out of the edge of the board like this, rather than the face of the board like on the Domino Connect. With those two in there. And with everything in place, it's just a question of offering that up. I have got a different Allen key ordered. No one hasn't arrived yet. And literally quarter turn of these. And that's in and done. So I know it's just two simple little joints, but I think it's fairly clear from that quick demonstration just how much quicker and faster and easier the Clamex connectors are over the Festool connectors. It should be as no surprise, to be honest, because the Clamex connectors are clearly thought through as part of the process, whereas the Festool Domino connectors were clearly a bit of an afterthought. They made them for the bigger one and then cobbled something together for the smaller machine. At least that's what it feels like. And I mentioned earlier on that I hadn't used them that much, and that the job that I bought them for didn't quite do the job for me. Let me show you what I mean now. Just pop that Clamex onto one side. I mean, first of all, you've got a pretty big access hole to cover there. I'll just undo these screws. Apart it comes. Here's my problem with it. I mentioned just before, I like to have the tenons in the edge, because it makes it easier to stack when I'm moving stuff out for transit. To have them in the face of a board like this makes it really awkward. And what do you do with them? Do you leave them in there and while you wrap everything up for transit, for shipping to the client's house? And if you do, what happens if they get bent, or what happens if one of those gets snapped? You are absolutely screwed. I mean, no question about that. If these get damaged at all, you're in real trouble. So what do? If you take them out, are they going to go back in again as firmly? Because you rely on that tight connection for the join to pull together. That has to go back in exactly the same place. That's the first thing that bothered me a little bit. That's one of the reasons why I didn't use them, haven't used them that much. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier on, one of the reasons why I bought them in the first place was to try and, because I had a cabinet to build in a very tight space. Well, actually, you've got a 25mm peg there sticking out from the face. That doesn't give you an awful lot of wiggle room, whereas with the Clamex connectors, you've got a sort of 4 or 5mm little stub, a little nubbin on there, and nothing else protruding. So you can get that into a much tighter space and still get the join connected and still get it nipped up tight. Whereas these, you need at least 25mm over and above the width of the carcass to fit in the space that you're trying to get it into. So that's not going to give you as snug a fit as you might want, and it certainly wasn't really what I wanted when I bought it for the job I bought it for. On the other hand, these are far from being a terrible connector. They work really well. I haven't had any problems with the ones that I have used. And I wouldn't hesitate to use them again, except, of course, I now have the Lamello. If you have a Domino, though, and you want to save yourself the extra cost of another Domino to buy the Lamello, then these are definitely worth considering. No real problems with them, no real issues with them at all, other than those slight niggles that I mentioned already. But that's it, I think, for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Before you go, can I just remind you that the best way not to miss one of my future videos is to subscribe to the channel. And if you do subscribe, then don't forget to hit that bell. Then you'll be notified whenever I put up something new, or whenever YouTube decides to tell you about it, because it's a little bit flaky, to be perfectly honest. Take a minute as well to check out the contents of the video description down below. There's all kinds of handy dandy little bits and pieces in there, as well as stuff I used in this video and links to support the channel through Patreon or PayPal. And I want to take a minute to thank all those folks who do support the channel through that process, or through one-off or recurring direct donations. You're literally helping me keep the lights on here. But that really is it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.